In this video, I'm going to talk about how to create your own virtual online exhibitions in a software called Hubs. Hubs is the tool that we're using for our virtual online campus at the University of Amsterdam, maintained and developed by the 4D Research Lab. This specific video was created for the project Museaal Verleden or Museal Past, which is a project about recreating past exhibitions in virtual reality and then evaluating what we gain from that as researchers, as teachers, or as exhibition designers. Nonetheless, the techniques demonstrated in this video are completely applicable to any kind of project that you do in Hubs. One big disclaimer before we start: Hubs used to be developed by Mozilla, the company that also created the Firefox browser, for instance, but they pulled the plug out of this project a few months back. Since then, it has moved into the open source independent community online, but that also means that at the moment, not everything is completely working as it should be or as it used to be. That said, let's get started. What you should do first is go to this URL, this website, virtualplaces-uva.eu, and then you get to this website. You will have to create an account, and that's very easily done by just hitting the button sign in. And here you can enter your email address, and then an email is sent to your email address with a confirmation link. Sometimes you have to wait a while before the link is arriving in your inbox, but this time it came in immediately. So you click on this link, and this will automatically create an account on the website and log you in. So I close this, and you see that I'm signed in. On this front page, you can access certain public rooms, virtual reality rooms that we already created in the context of other projects. But in this video, we're going to discuss the scene editor. The scene editor is what used to be called Spoke in the Mozilla Hubs when it was still Mozilla. And when you click on this, you get an overview of the projects that you have previously developed. So you can simply start by opening a new project. And a new project can start as a new empty project, or if you want, you can use other projects that have been tagged already as reusable on our platform. So these other projects that we already created, these virtual scenes, can be reused and adapted to your liking. But in this case, we're starting with a new empty project. So this is one of those things that I was referring to earlier with the disclaimer. There's an error showing up at the moment. You don't have to worry about this error. You can just click OK, but it means that the default models are not loaded in the scene. However, you don't need these models, so it's not really a bad thing. You can click on this one and you can decide to delete it. So when you click on an object in the scene here, this is your 3D viewport, you can see that it's also highlighted here on the right side, which is called the hierarchy. This is a simple hierarchical representation of what is present in the scene, and this is the 3D representation of what is present in the scene. So you can click on this and simply hit delete. It's a pretty straightforward piece of software with not too many functions, which is a good thing for beginners because it doesn't have a very steep learning curve. So what else is there except for this area called 3D viewport and the hierarchy? So we have a menu up here which has some navigation tools and manipulation tools that I will demonstrate in a bit. And then there's a basic menu which allows you to save save the project and go back to the project overview. Then here at the bottom, this is the asset library. So this is where all the things are stored that you put into the 3D environment, or that you can put into the 3D environment. So there are a certain number of default assets that Hubs already has. So this is different kinds of lamps, spawn points. I will discuss those in a bit. But also like images, videos, 3D models, etc. And then there is here below basic elements, there's my assets, and under my assets is where all the things that you personally uploaded go. So all the images or videos or models or audio will appear in this area. So how do you get content into your media library? Well, it's pretty easy. You simply need to drag and drop it from a Explorer window into the asset library. So I have here an Explorer window with several 3D models. And in the case of 3D models, and this is very important, it only takes 3D models in the GLB format. So GLB files. That means that if your 3D models that you want to use are not in GLB format, you need to convert them first into GLB so you can use them. So when you have your GLB files, you can simply drag and drop them. And this counts for any kind of media that you want to add. So also images or videos or audio. When you drop your media, it will appear in your media library. The name will be visible. Unfortunately, due to the transition, the thumbnailing doesn't work. So previously you could see a preview of the model or the image over here, but that functionality does unfortunately not work. So how do you get these models into the 3D environment? Because there is currently nothing here except for this little man here. Well, it's a simple matter of drag and dropping it into the 3D scene. So now it kind of appears where my mouse was when I released it. I can also drag and drop it over here directly in the hierarchy. And that has the advantage that the model will appear on the location exactly as it were modeled in the 3D modeling software that you use to create this object, for instance. And that's pretty important when you created an environment with architecture that should be exactly aligned. So the walls and the ceilings and the floors and everything else. You modeled it in a certain way. You want to have it also in a certain way in this environment, in this in specifically that way. So I select them now both by shift selecting and simply hit delete. When you want to recreate a exhibition, you need, of course, an exhibition space and a model of that exhibition space. That means that you need a plan of the exhibit and model it in 3D modeling software, export it, and then import it in this editor. This process I'm not going to discuss in this video. I have it already pre-modeled, so I have, for instance, a ground plan, and now I'm drag and dropping it directly into the hierarchy because I want this ground plan to appear exactly on the location where I also modeled it originally. So then I can also drag and drop the walls. So these are the three-dimensional models of the walls that are created based on the plan and historical photographs. And then I can also add the ceilings. And the reason that I add them all as separate elements rather than as one model is that I can now also turn them on and off. Because with the ceilings on, it becomes very hard to kind of look into the space and position other objects, art on the wall, etc., and navigate through the space. You want to have some overview, and the ceilings block this. So I'll show you over here how to make them invisible. So this is the only window that I haven't discussed yet. Here are basically all the properties that relate to the whatever you have selected here. So ceilings, and I don't want to have them visible. So before I'm exporting, I have to remember this, that I want them to be visible, but while I'm editing, I make them invisible. So, and then there's something like this. This should be over here. So how to manipulate these models? I'm going to demonstrate that with a model of this display table. I'll put it over here. So this one already appears on the right location because that's the way that I originally modeled it. But it is also perfectly possible that you have something that is not on the right location, and then you will want to move it around. So there are 3 tools here that allow you to translate or move the object, basically rotate the object around any kind of axis, or scale the object. And you can see that it has these in brackets a T and an R and a Y, which is the reference to the hotkey. So rather than clicking each time on these buttons, it is a good idea to remember the hotkey. So T for translate, R for rotate, and Y for scale, because it allows you to work a little bit more faster and more intuitive while you're moving things around. Then one first thing that you may already notice is that these movement gimbal doesn't appear very practically in the center of the object. That's again because the way that I modeled this and the 0 coordinates of this model are a little bit further away. So when you want to kind of move this gimbal to the center of the object, I can simply use this one, transform pivot point. So rather you can go for center. You can also click this button and then it toggles through the 3 options that you have. Bottom, selection, which is basically its original pivot point that it got from the object itself, and then center is automatically centered on the object. And now it makes it easier also to kind of move this object around like so. So often you have a lot of objects, and when you're trying to zoom on an object, at some point you're stuck. A quick way to focus on an object and to sort of recenter your scene to that object, the reason that I'm not able to zoom further in is because it is centered somewhere here, and I cannot kind of zoom in further than that level there. So with the object selected, I hit F for focus. So F for focus on the keyboard. Now the scene is focused on this object. So when I'm rotating now, I'm simply dragging the mouse and clicking the left mouse button and holding it. I'm rotating or orbiting around the selected object. Even when I select another object, I'm still rotating around the table. When I now want to rotate or focus on the walls, for instance, I select the walls and hit F for the walls. And now I rotate around the center point of all these walls. So F is a very important tool to quickly move through your scene and focus on different objects and able to kind of easily manipulate them. So F is a very important tool to use while you are editing your scene. So besides the translate tool, T, there's also the rotate tool, and the rotate tool changes the gimbal into this circular thing. So when I'm trying to rotate it on sort of the horizontal or y-axis, I just click and drag the gimbal. If I want to rotate on any of the other axes, I click and drag these axes. So currently when I'm rotating, it kind of jumps in increments of 90 degrees. And that is because that is determined here at the snapping mode. So currently it is snapping at 90-degree angles when I'm using the rotate tool, but it's also snapping at ½ meter increments when I'm using the translate tool. So when I switch over to translate, you can actually see that when I'm dragging this, it is jumping small steps, which is basically each time 50 centimeters or ½ meter. I can change this also. So now I'm making bigger steps. I can also change the increments of rotation. So when you're working in a rectangular space, a room with 90 degrees angles on the walls, this is generally a good thing to leave on, so you can be precise in your placement, especially in terms of rotation. But very often you want something different and you want to have more precise control over the movement especially. So then you want to turn off snapping. So when I've turned snapping off, and when I'm moving things around now, it makes very small steps. So the last tool is the scale tool, and that does exactly what you think it does. It allows you to scale the object. Also, you can choose to scale it in any of the axes. So it has more scaling in the height and on the width, but you can also use this cube, this gray cube in the middle, and when I drag this, it scales the entire object. Because it's the way that this is created is a little bit buggy. It is using the center point of the object, the 0 point of this object, as a reference for the scaling. So actually the pivot point is not used correctly by the scaling in this case. And then you see this effect. It does nonetheless scale. I mean, it creates a bigger object. And then I have to recenter this in this way in order to move this thing then around. Again, you can reset the scale over here at scale. And now I lost the object. Oh, it's over there. I focus on it and I can move it back into, hit F again. And now I want to rotate it 1 and 2 and back into its place where it belongs. Of course, you don't have to model all these things yourself. There are a lot of 3D models available online. And if you're not too picky about the exact shape of things, or maybe there are museums that have 3D objects that you want to use in your exhibition, you can often find them online in a website like Sketchfab, which is one of the biggest 3D model resources online. You can search for models and also you can purchase them here, but a lot of models are also freely downloadable. Models from cultural institutions like museums and universities, you can often download for free. So a model like this, a toy theater model from 1925 from the Sørlands Museum in Denmark. They have uploaded a number of 3D models of their collection to Sketchfab, and you can select download 3D model if you want to download this model and use it in your own scene. So when you download this model, you on Sketchfab, you will need to create a Sketchfab account in order to do this. You can select GLB as converted format. Its original format with what it was uploaded with was GLTF. And as you can see, the size of this model is significant. Its original size 158 MBs. The total size of the scene in Hubs that you can create is 125 MB. So this entire model would be too big to place in the scene. Luckily, the converted GLB files is smaller than that, and it is mainly because of the size of the models, mainly due to the texture. So basically everything that is used to create all this intricate detail. The model itself is probably pretty simple, but the textures are scanned and uploaded in the highest resolution. And we cannot use that in Mozilla Hubs because otherwise the scene will clog up completely and you won't be able to use it. So we use the smaller size GLB file. In this case, you download it. And then you upload it exactly in the same way as I demonstrated before by drag and dropping it to the scene. I already went ahead and did this, so the model is this one, the toy theater. I can drag and drop it over here, for instance on this display table. And now I can use the translate tool to kind of position it a little bit more accurately. I turn off snapping. I want to put it right on the table, and maybe I want to put it on the table, like on the edge of the table. Next to 3D models, you can also add other kinds of 2D media to the scene, such as images or video, and you can also add audio files. I will demonstrate adding images because that may be one of the most useful for creating an exhibition with, for instance, paintings or drawings on the wall. They are added to your asset library exactly in the same way as you did as with 3D models. So I have a couple of images here of theater-related art, and I can simply drag and drop it. And I have also an image that I created myself of a sign that you can use next to the artwork as a description of who made it, its date, technique, add all kinds of information. So you add them to the scene in the same way that you did with 3D models. So you pick your asset and you drag and drop it. So when I'm dropping it to a wall, it will automatically also stick to the wall, but that means that it kind of has to fight with the face of the wall about which one is visible. So because it's exactly on the same place of the wall, and then you get this kind of flickering effect. Clearly that's something that you don't want, so you want to move them a little bit in front of the wall. So I'm using the translate tool. Important that snapping is off, and I just move them a few centimeters or so in front of the wall, and then we haven't got this issue anymore. Again, when you're working with a piece like this, the F key is important to focus on the object. I'm also now temporarily turning on the ceilings because the ceiling is dit low, so the object, the painting will probably something like this on the wall. And then I can also add the sign that goes next to it. Again, I have to move it a little bit in front of the wall, and then I can decide to, with Y, to scale it. I scale it like so. I can also, when scaling becomes a little bit difficult and it goes too fast, you can also simply decide to scale it over here in the properties panel. So when I'm hovering above one of these, I can start dragging them. I click and drag, and the number increases or decreases depending on the direction of my drag. It's a little bit more of a precise way to manipulate the scale tool. So this, by the way, works the same with rotation and location. So I can put the sign here, I can decide to put the sign here, wherever is convenient. Since these are images and JPEG images basically, the user that will visit the virtual exhibit can click on this with a right mouse and enlarge them in front of them. So that's a pretty nice feature that images and also video has in this Hubs software. So I may have decided that this painting and sign should not go on this wall but on another wall. For instance, the one over there, I select both of them in this case, and I can move them together, and I want to rotate them, and now I want to rotate them exactly 90 degrees. So I turn on snapping mode, 90 degrees, and turning off snapping mode and going back to the translate tool, hitting F again for focus or better view, yes, something like that, and then moving it like here. So the next thing we should discuss is lighting. This video is not going into all the detail there is about lighting, but I will discuss some basics. So if you go to elements in your asset browser, you will have 5 different types of light. You can add, for instance, a point light to your scene, and you can see its effect on the wall. You can change the intensity over here by simply dragging or adding a number, or changing the color over here. You can also add directional light, which is kind of a light similar to the sun. It kind of has a global effect on everything. So when I rotate this light a little bit, you can see how it kind of affects the lighting of the walls on the scene. But maybe with interior scenes, this is not the most important kind of lamp there is. You do note, however, that there are no shadows on the scene. And it is possible to get shadows. So currently we are in the lit rendering mode. So that means that models and everything in the scene is lit, but no shadows are cast on top of other objects. So we can turn on shadows. And as you can see now, we do see shadows. And when I rotate this object, like so, the shadows also change. This, however, only works when you have shadows enabled on these objects. So for each 3D object, you can enable cast shadow and receive shadow. So for this ground plane, I can turn off receive shadows, and then you will see no shadows anymore. So you will have to do this for each individual object that you want to have a shadow cast or a shadow like cast on itself. Using shadows in this way is not really recommendable, because the user, when he or she enters a Hubs room, will not have shadows turned on by default. That's just how the application works, and there's no way to change that. So the user won't see the shadows unless he or she knows how to turn them on. And not everyone will, most of the people using these environments will not know how to do this. So that's why I would not recommend spend too much time in getting the shadows exactly right, because nobody will see them anyway. And it's a bit unfortunate because it does add a little bit of realism to your scene. So the way that I recommend to work, if you really want to have this kind of realistic shadows and light reflections, etc., you will have to pre-bake them before you import them in Hubs. So in your 3D modeling software, you have to create textures on which the light and the shadows is projected in a procedure called baking. This is quite technical and probably a little bit too far-fetched for the general user to do, but this would be the recommended workflow. So for the lighting, you can also use the skybox. That is an element that's added by default to your scene. And the skybox basically is a sort of automatically generated sky with a sun, and you can change various things, like if I change the luminance, it will be lighter or darker. The latitude, I guess that's referring to the latitude on Earth. So Amsterdam, and where we are now, is about 50. So I'm not sure to what degree this is realistic, but you have to try this out a little bit. So we're now here. So this goes from 0 to 24 hours. So apparently now at 12 we are at the latest time of the day. So there are a few more features that I'd like to discuss that may be handy for you. So one of them is the group object. So the group object is basically an empty object that you can use to group other objects. So when I want to group the walls and the ceilings and sort of all the architectural elements to one group, and I can rename this group to architecture, and then I create another group that's called paintings in room A, and another group that's called display tables, and that allows, especially when you have a lot of different objects, to organize this a little bit more in a better way, so I have a little bit more overview, and your hierarchy doesn't become very long, and you don't have to scroll all the time to find the model that you want to focus on. So this is the group element. Another one is the Trojka Text. So if you want to sort of add text in the scene directly without having to make a note, you can simply do it over here. Hello, and you can see it's over here appear. So you can write your notes or your signs in this way as well. Hello visitors, welcome to my exhibition. But if you need a little bit more control about, maybe you can change the font. No, you cannot even change the font, I think. So when you want to have more control about font and design and everything, then you will need to custom create your signs. But nonetheless, this is a fast and nice way to add text to your scene. Yeah, there are all kinds of other elements that I'm not going to discuss now. If you look for the documentation online on Hubs, you will find a description of each of those. The last one that is very important, essential, I would say, is the spawn point object. So I have already a spawn point. It's this man over here. I can have multiple spawn points, by the way. Here now there are 2 spawn points. And spawn points are the location where the user appears, is teleported to when he or she enters the room for the first time. So I want to have the visitors start in the area of the entrance. So I would position my spawn point or spawn points over here. This arrow shows you like the looking direction of the user when he or she is spawned on that location. So this one is now looking towards the wall. I may want to have this spawn point look a little bit more towards the main entrance. And yeah, one spawn point is generally sufficient. But when you expect meetings with a lot of users at the same time, it is recommendable to have multiple spawn points on several locations, because then people or their avatars are not spawned, teleported all on top of each other when they enter the room. So they appear on different locations throughout the room. So that's a little bit of a nicer experience when entering the room. And then last but not least is the floor plan. So that is generally already present in your scene when you start a new one. And the floor plan is basically the algorithm which decides where users can walk and where they cannot walk. So in this case, people should be able to walk on this surface and they should not be able to walk through walls. And with this kind of setup with straight walls and a flat surface with no differences in elevation, the basic floor plan settings generally work fine, but there are important settings that you have to turn on each of the objects that you want to use into the floor plan calculation. So when you select an object, like the ground plan in this case, I want people to walk on top of that, I should turn on walkable. It's, I think, already turned on by default. And even though you don't want people to walk on the walls, you still want walkable to be turned on that model, because otherwise it won't be combined into one walk mesh basically that computes where people can and can't walk, because it will automatically identify, okay, this is a 90-degree sort of object, that must be a wall, so people are not allowed to pass through it. But the effect of that is that people theoretically could walk on top of that surface above, on top of the wall. But you will have to ensure that walkable is signed on for that one. So then there are several settings in the floor plan object that are fed into that algorithm that computes where people can and can't walk. You don't have to change it. When you use a simple setup with straight walls, one level floor surface, it generally works fine. When you work with very irregular surfaces and lots of different elevation differences and ramps and narrow passages, then you will have to fine-tune these kind of settings, and sometimes even create one object that will be used as an area where only that area people can walk on. So when everything is created and set, it's time to publish the scene. But before that, we can also save the project with file and then save project, or save as, if you want to save it as another project. And then it is also listed in that project overview that I showed in the beginning. So whenever you're ready and you want to publish a scene, you hit this button. You change the name. It's very important in this project name to not use underscores, because then you will get an error without you explaining what you have done wrong. But it's important not to use underscores. So Yeah, so in this case you can also change the attribution to your name or your organization who created this, who is responsible for this model. You can turn on allow remixing, allow promotion, so that allows promotion of the model on our website, the virtual campus, and remixing allows other users to use your scene to kind of add to it and create a new scene with it. But your scene will be saved as it is and won't be modified by any other. So then you click save and publish, and then you get a performance check, a sort of an overview. It analyzes the entire scene and sees how well it performs. When you have red marks, it means that it's on the high side, so it is actually not good for performance. So polygon count is too large, so they recommend not more than 50,000 triangles, so very low poly models. In my experience, you can go much higher than this and still have a reasonably smooth scene. So don't be afraid too much when this says high. But if you want to have a very sort of scene with a lot of frames per second, so fast moving frames for the user, smooth experience, then you want to keep this as low as possible. That means that you use models that are low poly, so have little very simple geometry with few triangles. Materials, so now 27 unique materials were used. That's apparently medium. Textures, so I'm not using very high resolution textures, so that's good. Green, and I'm using one light. So the more lamps, lights, dynamic lights that you add to the scene, the more it affects the performance. So that's another reason to generally not go crazy with adding lights. And if you really want realistic lighting, you have to look into baking lighting beforehand in 3D modeling software. And then there's file size. So the file size limit is 125 MBs, recommended 16 MBs. Generally, it's very hard to keep below 16 MBs, and much of my scenes are way beyond that, and they still run reasonably smooth on not high performance machines. So then you hit publishing and it will upload it, and then I can click view. This is the URL that is linking to your scene basically. So every time that if you store this URL and you copy paste it, you will get to this this page, and here it's allowed to create a room with this scene. So it's important to be aware of the difference between a scene and a room. So the scene is the thing that you have created in this editor software after you have exported it. While you are working on that project, on that scene, it is still called a project. As you have exported it, it becomes a scene. And a scene can be used by users, such as yourself or any other users, to create a room with. So one scene, with one scene, multiple users can create an endless number of different rooms using exactly the same scene. So when you want to create your room with your scene, you simply click the button, create a room with the scene. And now we've created a unique location with a unique URL that you can send to others to come and join and look at your models at the exhibition you created. So you can simply join over here, and you can see that I have been spawned at that location where I put one of the spawn points, and then I can move around in my scene that I just created. can right click on the artwork on the wall to look at it. Can look at this. So as you can see, this one is a little bit difficult to see, so the table should be a little bit higher or your avatar should be a little bit lower. But a quick way to resolve this kind of things is simply to turn on flying mode. So I hit G on the keyboard, fly mode is enabled. Now I can, like, it ignores floors and walls and everything. You fly through everything, but that allows you also to go into kind of every object and look at any detail very close up. Turn it off again and I'm like moved back to floor level. So when you want to share the room with others or when you want to publish it on our public rooms page, it is recommended to change the name of this room to something more sensible than the auto-generated name by Hubs. So you do this by going over here and room info and settings and then edit it. So I call this one Leiden, for instance, and then I apply the new name and you will see that the name in the URL also changes. So this is now the name by which this room is known. So when you update your scene, make modifications to it, add more models to it, change the lighting, anything, you do not have to recreate that room again. You can simply hit again after your modifications. You can do publish, and you can now ignore view your scene because you have already created a room with your scene. And all the updates that you did are also automatically transferred to the room that you created with it. In fact, it's better to kind of use or create just one room to test with. That will also be the final room. And you simply store this link in your favorites or in a document, and then you know where to go for your room. Unfortunately, there is no way to check on your account which rooms you created. So the only way to know which rooms you created is that you save this link somewhere. So I think these were the most important features and techniques that I wanted to discuss in this video. So have fun creating your own virtual exhibitions.